Eric, can you hear us? Mhm.
Where's Jeanette?
Hello? Hello? Mhm. The only other thing I can do is switch it to the computer audio. Hello, this is Dana Pauly. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, get
Okay.
started.
Wonderful.
Okay, great. Can you guys see the screen too?
We can see the screen right now, we see just the background.
Oh, presentation?
What do you mean by the background?
Just for your screen background, not the presentation. Open that up.
We don't see the presentation, I mean.
Does it say Mobilize Your Corporate Giving Program?
Does it say swap displays on?
Not yet. Right now we see mountains.
How about that?
How about now?
Not yet.
Swap displays at the top.
Got it.
Okay. I did.
Well, while Dana's trying to set up the presentation, I'll sort of start the talking part. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. This is Brian Gaines here. I'm the CEO for MD Bio Foundation. We're just trying to work out some technical difficulties now. Oh, hold on. How about now? Is that better? Okay. Can folks see the presentation here?
You see a slide that says Mobilize Your Corporate Giving Program?
All right, yay! All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, this is Brian Gaines from MD Bio Foundation. Thanks for hanging in there as we worked through some of our challenges. We have a really, I think, a really terrific program scheduled for you guys today. We have two co-presenters I'll let them introduce themselves. Liz Huntley, who's a MD Bio Foundation board member and a former head of corporate citizenship at MedImmune, now with AstraZeneca, who will be joining us in a minute. Liz?
Hi, I'm glad to be here today. As Brian said, I spent about 8 years at MedImmune leading the corporate citizenship program there, where I was responsible for the company's corporate giving, employee volunteerism, local community relations program. I'm still with the company, but have transitioned into a different role with our parent company, AstraZeneca, but I'm happy to share my experience in my prior role today and as a board member for the MD Bio Foundation.
Oh, Janine's got it. Oh. That's not the right presentation. Okay. And also we have Dana Pauly, who is the Director of Development for MD Bio Foundation. We're going to try and get this thing working here. Dana, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Dana Pauly. I am the Director of Development and Marketing for MD Bio Foundation. I'm very excited to be talking to you today about how to find corporate funding for your mobile laboratory program.
So the MD Bio Foundation has been, thank you, Janae, a founding member of the Mobile Lab Coalition. For those of you who have been involved in the coalition, know that what a great organization it is. For other folks who are just joining for the first time and want to learn about how to build a mobile laboratory, the coalition is the place to really find those kinds of resources, and hopefully today will help to add some value to what you're doing here today. So I'm going to turn it over to Dana in a moment, but before I do, there are basically three parts to our presentation today. The first part is really about developing your case for support. The second part will be presenting your case. That's where Liz will be coming in. Right. And then the last part is building your partnership for the long haul. And then hopefully we will get through this very quickly, or as quickly as we can, to try and give you all an opportunity to speak. So this is going to be more of a high-level presentation, so sort of a corporate fundraising 101. So I'm going to turn it over to Dana and let her take it from here, and she'll take over.
Hello, everybody. Again, I get the fun part of talking about the prep work that you'll need to get yourself started when you're ready to begin your corporate support outreach. The first thing that you want to think about is the value of your mobile laboratory program. There's a lot of different things you can talk about, whether it be your lab features, your activities and curriculum, the staff that you have running your programming, and your target audience. Once you have to identify these assets, which could be the same thing that you're seeking funding for or what you're leveraging to find funding for, you want to let that be the factors as you start your research. This is the time to talk about yourself. You want to talk about the things that you've done in the past, the problems that you're trying to solve, your solutions, and the descriptions of your upcoming programs so that you can really start looking at the companies that will have the same goals and missions that you have. You want to always be clear about what you're asking for, whether it be your fundraising goal, the money that will be used for your programming, and when you would like to raise it by. As you start thinking about the companies that you're looking for funding for, there are a lot. So there are three things that you always want to remember: what you do, what they do, and where they're located. It's easiest to start with the companies that are in your backyard so that you're able to leverage the close proximity, whether you're inviting them for tours or scheduling meetings. When you're looking at a company's website for specific information about their giving, you want to remember that companies will use different words to talk about their giving, whether it be sustainability, corporate citizenship, corporate responsibility, or sponsorship. Once you're able to find that information on your website, you should be able to find why the company is giving, what their funding priorities are, and any information on formal proposal or giving programs. So you've done your research, you have your story, you know what you're talking about. It's now time to bring on the hype. This is the time to think about any photos or renderings, drawings, or plans that you have for your mobile laboratory program, any proposals, letters of intent or inquiry, because you can use these to start thinking about how you want to market yourself, whether it be on your website, social media, through press release, or any printed materials.
Dana, can I add one point in here?
Sure.
So if I could, so this is Brian again. So I wanted to just make one point about when you're really thinking about putting together a proposal to put in front of a funder. I think it's really important, since most funders, and Liz, I think will speak to this, don't really know what a mobile lab is, right? Those of us who are in the field, or those of us who are thinking about it, probably have a pretty good idea about what we're trying to do. But for a lot of funders, this concept is pretty foreign to them. So really putting together a proposal that has a lot of photographs or pictures, or can actually demonstrate how you are going to use the vehicle, what it's going to look like inside, what maybe the wrap might look like, what kind of recognition the funder will get, either a mock-up. When we were fundraising for our last mobile lab, we would put together, we did sort of a wrap with the logo of the company where we're going to pitch. And that was a great way for folks to really feel like they could actually see what they were doing.
And to Brian's point, it really helps with the excitement of the program that you're doing, which is a good segue to the next point. You are excited about the work that you're doing. You've developed all of these materials. You have your plans in place. You might be in the process of doing your build itself. Now is the time to really start getting everyone around you excited too, because you're going to be able to leverage those resources in the future. So always think about who you know. When you start from an internal standpoint, you have your board members, you have your staff, and you have your volunteers. Talk to them about the work that you're doing, because there's a chance that they might have some contacts at some of the companies that you're looking to start working with. Also, you never know, you might have some contacts at some of the companies that you're looking at. You don't always have to necessarily start with the CSR representative or the head of the company. If you know someone that works there, talk to them, get them excited, and they should be your champion and help you get to where you want to be. And then you want to cast your net even wider. Think about your friends, your vendors, any mutual contacts, because once you start talking to people, there's a greater likelihood that they'll say, oh, I know so-and-so who works somewhere.
So let me add one more point here, because a lot of folks I know in our organization and our board often say to us, well, I don't know the head of the company, or I don't know the head of the corporate social responsibility. Oftentimes, again, maybe Liz will speak to this too, it's oftentimes better to get someone who just works at the company. So if you can find an individual who's excited about your program, who maybe could be at any point in the company, whether they be middle manager or just at any point, and they will be your champion and bring your program to their company, that sometimes be more powerful than getting someone at the top end of the company.
So you're almost ready to start doing your outreach for your company, but you want to think about what it is you're going to be asking them for. So companies usually have their giving in two large buckets, cash giving or non-cash giving. And when you separate your cash giving, it's usually foundation grants, which have a formal component to them, corporate contributions, which could be a direct ask or writing a proposal, matching gifts through their employees, corporate sponsorships, or cause-related marketing. On the other side, you have non-cash giving, which can include product donations, pro bono service, and employee volunteerism, and donated space. So you found your match. What are you going to do now? You're going to look at what your program has and align your mission, vision, and goals with the company that you're targeting. You're going to make sure you're prepared, which you've already done. You've got your stories, you've got your supporting materials, and you're about at the point where you're ready to do your outreach and start cultivating those companies. When you're ready, you're going to reach out to your first point of entry contact. If you can, find out how they prefer to be contacted. Some people prefer the phone or over an email. When you make that outreach, make sure that you keep it brief but purposeful. You know what you're trying to do, whether it be to get to a meeting, to ask any questions from the research that you've done on the website. Always remember what you're looking for. I know that it can seem overwhelming to think about getting corporate support, but it is possible as long as you do the legwork in the beginning. Now I'm going to turn it over to Liz Huntley, who will share some insights from the CSR perspective.
Great. Thanks, Dana. So from my experience, and that's I'm speaking from my experience at MedImmune, you know, Dana's points around doing research and preparation are really the key point that I want to hammer home today. That if you do your research and you do the legwork on the front end, it will make your job and the CSR person's job much easier on the back end. So there's no substitute for preparation. And the reason that is because there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So there's no golden nugget that's going to get you corporate support from every company. Each company is really different and distinct in their programs, from all the way from what they focus on to how they receive grant requests to why they give and what motivates them, and to the most important factors in making their decisions. So you really kind of, it's unfortunate for you because it involves a lot more legwork, but in the end, it's really the most effective method is to really tailor your request and your outreach for each company. Next slide. So the reasons why companies give are very diverse, as I mentioned. You know, often it's to advance business objectives. It's always generally to increase visibility and the corporate reputation. Often it's to meet employee and customer and stakeholder expectations. So there's, depending on the company, you know, their employees may really want them to be an active member of their local community and to support, you know, valuable nonprofit organizations. And so oftentimes it's a key component of their employee engagement efforts. And in Dana's point around the kind of employee matching gifts programs, that's actually a really great way to get in with a company, is to get their employees to support you. And oftentimes corporate dollars can follow that employee involvement as well. And so overall, it's, you know, also, you know, a desire to be a good corporate citizen as well. Sometimes with smaller companies, and again, this is the kind of point that no one is the same. Sometimes if it's a smaller company, it may be because of an executive's commitment, you know, to a certain cause. So they may, if it's a small startup, you know, their chief executive may be really interested in giving to the community, and so that's something important to know as well. Next slide. So this slide is a bit presumptuous because it assumes that there is a CSR professional at the company. And for a lot of companies, that's not necessarily the case. As I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all profession. There can be different titles and different responsibilities. It can sometimes be a person in HR. It could be someone who, you know, who, like myself, who is more specialized in this area. Generally, these people work both internally and externally, so they work with the senior leadership and employees to determine, you know, where to give and what organizations to support. And then externally, they work with the nonprofit partners and NGOs to actually give the grants and to be active. Sometimes it actually is not an individual, but an employee committee who actually makes these decisions. It could be an individual, or if it's a larger company that's a more sophisticated program, it could be an entire team of people, each who sometimes have different areas of focus. So the key there would be to figure out who's the right person who kind of fits the STEM education or the science education, part of their portfolio. Generally, these programs work from a budget, and that's done on an annual basis. And generally, the people that you're speaking to or reaching out to are not the ultimate decision maker. In some cases they are, but sometimes it has to be blessed by the company leadership, or as I mentioned, an employee committee may take it to a vote. Or there may be, some other means as well. So, just keep that in mind, that the person who you're talking to, they may think your program is great, but they also have to be able to sell it internally. Generally, companies receive far more requests than they're able to fund, so keep that in mind. And generally, as someone who has been pitched many, many times about and heard incredible programs, we don't like saying no, but oftentimes there's only so much funding, and so we say no a lot more than we say yes. So they're not an unsympathetic audience. They're just sometimes in a tough spot with the amount of resources that they have. Next slide. So as I mentioned, companies are on different levels of the spectrum when it comes to their sophistication of their corporate giving programs. If you're going after a larger company who has a more involved program, likely they've gone through the process of determining the materiality, which is basically where they have determined what issues are of material interest to their stakeholders, and what issues are they able to make an actual impact on. And it's kind of finding the intersection between society's need and the company's interests. So that's what this slide gets to. But basically, that's your point of where you can map your program and your objectives to the company's objectives. And that's really the key point of what CSR professionals try to do, is to find the programs and nonprofits that help support the community need, that also help to advance the business and the business's need at the same time. Okay. So as you're going to go in to pitch a company, these are some key questions to ask. You want to see what you have in common with the business. So is your audience one that the company really is looking to go after? And that kind of fits the first 2 points there as well. Do we address any issues of interest for the company? So for us and our relationship with MD Bio Foundation, we hire STEM professionals. And so for us, it was a no-brainer because they're looking to educate and interest students in STEM careers. And so for us, that's where our mutual interest kind of lies. They also have, great outreach to the local community, local legislators, the media. All of those are audiences of interest for us as well. And then, how visible are you in the community? If you're in the media often, if you're driving your truck around and people see it every single day, the visibility that your truck could offer when it comes to a logo on the side of it, like a moving billboard, those are all, things that could set you apart from, say, a maybe more traditional classroom-based, program. Okay. So here's where we get into the do's and don'ts. And again, this is my view, which everybody is different and every company is different. The first thing you really need to do is look critically at your program and determine the value of your program relative to the specific company that you're going after. So what motivates one company doesn't motivate another company. And so to really focus on where you could help that particular company is really key. Dana mentioned going to the company's website. That is really your first stop. You can find so much information out there, and if there's no information on their website, that's probably a good message to you as well, that maybe that's not worth your time to go after, because if they're not at the point where they put it on their website, likely there's not significant funding, available. So Dana mentioned a few of the key terms, but there could be a grant section, a CSR, the corporate social responsibility, a sustainability, or even a giving section. They call it a lot of different things. but oftentimes, if a company does have an established program, it is somewhere on their website. The other thing that you can do, which can provide a lot of valuable information and intel for you, is to check out their media section or their press releases or their social media channels. Often if they're giving to community organizations or nonprofits, they're issuing press releases or they're tweeting about their employees out volunteering somewhere or check presentations or any of that. So that gives you a better insight as to what their giving priorities are, as well as organizations that they're already giving to, and whether they have an active employee program as well. Generally, I hate voicemail. That is a personal thing. Might be somewhat generational. I much prefer email, but even that being said, I get a lot of emails, and so this is where the situation comes into play, where people are getting a lot of kind of unsolicited requests from organizations. So if you have the opportunity to go in through a board member or an employee or another kind of contact within the organization, or meet somebody out at a public event, or anything that you're making it a more personal interaction, it helps to remove your note, your email, from the masses, which can really be key. Some organizations, they just want you to submit your grant request on their website and that's it, and there's no need for kind of a personal outreach, and that's okay. So if they tell you that, then listen, that's the key. So that's quite all right. Basically be brief but purposeful. So there's no need to send a very elaborate grant proposal, the first time you email someone or reach out to them. And with that, limit your supporting materials unless they're requested. We actually never wanted the 20-page grant proposal. I want a front and back, of the paper, or 2 pages or less. You should be able to make your case in that amount, and if we do need additional information, we'll absolutely request it. And then the last point around start small and build. Our first grant to MD Bio Foundation, I think, was $5,000 to support a summer camp. It has since grown, over the years, and depending on the year, sometimes it's been more than others. But the key is to really think about developing a long-term relationship, and sometimes that starts with a couple $1,000 donation or an employee match, but then can grow and build and evolve over time and really into like a real meaningful partnership. Okay, so on the don'ts list, generally, you don't want to ask for money on your first contact, and some companies feel differently about that, but I would say generally, I think the key is to start to build the relationship and not just kind of focus on the financial. I see a lot of companies that just, it's all about, getting a grant and getting a financial support, which is obviously helps pay your bills and keep you in business for sure, but there's a lot of other ways to partner other than just financial support. And with a lot of companies, you can develop the relationship with things like employee volunteerism or employee matching gifts, which will help lead you to the financial support angle. A lot of companies don't just want to write a check, they want to be involved in other ways. And so if you also can look at, hey, we're having this event, we have local legislators coming, would you like to come? That's a great way to start to build that relationship without just asking for a check. You don't want to reach out to them, to anyone, without doing your research first. So you need to understand their program, what they focus on, what their priorities are, before you have that initial outreach. This is a key point here around volunteers. Companies are always looking for good organizations to send their employees to volunteer with. I've had a lot of organizations that have said that they have the capacity to take volunteers, or they can take more volunteers than they're really able to, but volunteer management is definitely an art. And so there's no faster way to lose a company's support than to provide a kind of a lacking or a not very meaningful experience for their employees. So you want their employees to come out, have an incredible time, come back to the company, talk about how wonderful it is, and then, build upon that. If they come back with a negative feeling, or they say, I didn't really feel like I did anything over those, 3 hours, it was kind of a waste of time, you're likely not going to hear from them again. This is one of the key points. Everyone always thought that if they could get to the head of our company, then they would get a check. When in reality, the head of the company just forwards the emails to me and say, do what you will with this, or, this person's asking for funding. So it's really key about, finding who the right person is, and sometimes that can be an employee, sometimes that's a CSR person, sometimes that's an HR person, sometimes, it could really be anyone. Worst case scenario, you can call the front desk, at a company and ask, and, that always works too. Those calls would get forwarded to me too. So they did make it to the right person, usually. Please don't call and email excessively. Like I said, sometimes, the person receives a ton of emails. Sometimes the process could be really long. They may only give out checks, once a year or twice a year. So understanding that part of the process is key too. And I know it's frustrating and daunting, but these things take time, and the relationships take time to build. So, I guess be patient, be persistent, but that's kind of my thing. And then just to end on the start small and continue to build when you think about these relationships. So it's not just a one-off check. Think longer term, how you can build that year over year or program to program, to really take things forward. So just to give a brief overview of our relationship with the MD Bio Foundation, this is one where we started off, like I said, with a nominal, check, and we've really grown it. So we receive recognition on the mobile lab. We have our logos on there, on the website and social media. We've also been very involved in volunteer opportunities, so we've gotten our employees engaged in the different events that they have. We've had our executives do speaking engagements, and then we also, like myself, I serve on the board. We also have someone else who serves on the board. And we've been creative. So we've done summer camp tours where we've hosted the summer camp at our facility and taken them on lab tours and had our professionals speak to them. We've partnered on the media front from both interviews and hosting interviews on the mobile lab, as well as doing op-eds around issues related to STEM education under thought leadership. So it's really a multifaceted relationship, which is really what drives the value home for us. There's, yes, financial support, but there's employee volunteerism, there's thought leadership, our corporate reputation, even local community support and government affairs involved as well. And so that's really, for us, makes it much more meaningful than just, writing a check.
Mm-hmm. So thanks, Liz. This is Brian again. So the last part of our presentation really is around, so you've gotten the check, right? You've done all your work, you've gotten to the right person, you've got your grant, but the trick is not to make it a one-time grant. The trick is to really, how do you build a partnership over the long haul? And I think using MedImmune, AstraZeneca as an example, as Liz said, we started with a $5,000 grant, and it's gone to a six-figure grant from there. And it's an ongoing relationship. And we know that some years it's going to be that big gift, and some years, frankly, because of business pressures, it's not going to be. But we don't give up. We keep developing that relationship. And I think that's some of the things that we have done really well throughout our time. So how do we get to yes, right? What's key is, I think, as Liz mentioned, is really understanding the return on investment that you're bringing to that business, right? It's the argument of this is the right thing to do is not enough to win the grant. It's really got to be this mix of right organization partnered with the right funder to be able to make it go. Even if you have the greatest program in the world, and we all run, I think MD Bio Foundation is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But you know what? Not every funder is going to agree with that. And so finding that right fit is really, really important. One way to do that is to have funders and is to come out and have them actually visit your program. So I say, have them taste your product. So we're fortunate we have a mobile lab so folks who can come out. but finding those opportunities where you can engage directly with the CSR professional or the corporate giver or the foundation to have them come out to your program, talk to participants, talk to the folks that you serve, that's critical. Don't be afraid to ask. No one is going to give you money if you don't ask. So sometimes I know not all of us on the phone here are fundraisers, but if you don't ask, you don't get.
Actually, to that point, Brian,
Yeah.
We mentioned our first $5,000 donation. At that point, I had joined the board, and we had never been asked for funding from MD Bio Foundation. And I literally turned, to one of the staff and was like, "Why have you never asked us for money?" And that's what led to the first check. So you do have to ask.
I didn't work here then.
So that's a great way. If you don't ask, you don't get. And the last point on this slide is a no now is not a no forever. I cannot tell you how many times we've been turned down for a grant, but they say come back or here's how you can get better. And asking the professional for feedback is okay. Why didn't this get funded in a nice way? And they will tell you, this didn't fit our mix, or we didn't understand how your evaluation plan was, or this doesn't meet our students. There's a whole bunch of different things that can get going.
Yeah, well, and I would say with that too is that oftentimes you run a number of different components of your program, and so what you might have pitched them as to support might actually not be the right fit for them, but another part of your program could. And so that's what I would say too, is also think about, what you're asking for them to support, and that's where the feedback from the organization can really be key for that, to say, would there be something that would interest you more, or we have this other thing, would that be a good fit as well?
Absolutely. And then also with a funder like MedImmune or AstraZeneca, we have proposed multiple products and programs that will fit, so that it's not just, okay, here's my mobile lab, but here's my summer camp, here's my after-school program, those kinds of things. And I think that goes to this slide, which is around, building the relationship and how you can do that. One of the things that has worked really well for us is, again, and Liz mentioned, is how can you get their employees out to do different programs? And this slide just shows some pictures of some corporate volunteers coming out to our program, or in some cases, we bring them out into them. We'll bring the students to the corporate office, have them tour the company, have them meet as many people as they can, and that really demonstrates a way that you're doing that. And that works really, really well for our corporate funders who want to do something different than just their regular jobs. So remember, the most important thing is around what is the return on investment for a business? These are businesses, so they are in the corporate giving business, but they also have a product to sell. And so anytime that you could sort of link what you're doing, how you can benefit their company by what you're doing, is only going to help you. I think the best example is the thought leadership bullet here, which is where, in this case with Liz's boss, I partnered with Liz's boss to co-write a op-ed that appeared in the Washington Post. And it was a huge win for both of us, because for the company, they were able to partner with a nonprofit leader, and we were able to partner with a corporation to talk about STEM education. It wasn't about their business. It wasn't about how many widgets they're going to sell, but it's about how these two entities are supporting the community. And there's a number of ways to do that. And so be creative. You all have, or you're trying to build, a very unique product, which is a mobile laboratory, and that brings a lot of assets and resources. Use them all. Again, this is just about volunteer opportunities. I think we spoke to this a bit. There's, again, finding ways to get the folks in these companies or in your funders out to do something, whether it be company tours or exhibits, or speaking on your mobile lab to students. Anything like that really just builds that relationship. Media. So this has been something we have been really successful with. This here is a picture of a video from one of our funders. This is our funder from Northrop Grumman. And we had a film crew coming out to film on our mobile laboratory, and they said, can you invite someone from one of your supporters to come out and speak? We invited our representative from Northrop Grumman, and it was huge for her. She wound up showing it all over her company, so great way to sort of build that connection. media is a great way to do that. And let's face it, everybody wants to Northrop Grumman wants to be associated with being involved with a great company, not just building airplanes. This is a thought leadership point I made earlier. Being able to do that is really critical. I'm going to move a little quickly here so we can get to the question and answer period. So here are our key takeaways. I'm going to leave this up here for you all to see, and maybe I think we're at the question and answer period. So I'm going to stop right now and see if folks have questions. We want to make sure we hear from you and get some interaction and see what kind of questions we can answer from you guys. So please go ahead and chime in, and maybe you can just introduce yourself before you speak. All right, I have a question for Liz, actually. Mm-hmm. Liz, can you tell us a time when you originally said no to a program and then ultimately sort of came around, and why did that happen? So how did someone go from a no to a yes?
Now I'm trying to think. So I'll try to think of a specific opportunity, but I would say it did happen, and it did happen probably with some good regularity, but oftentimes it had to do more with funding than anything else. Mm-hmm. And the availability of funding. I actually I try to be a very candid person, and I value candor, and to be with that is to do it in a nice way, but to be very honest. And so we actually had the kind of decline letters where we had some that would say basically, these are areas of support, your organization does not fall within them, thank you for your interest, we wish you the best of luck. And then we had ones that said, these are our areas of focus, your organization falls within them. Unfortunately, we have to look at requests based on availability of funding. We encourage you to ask again in the future. And so we would try to set that expectation with each organization to say, like, oh no, you actually, this is a really good fit for us, it's just a really bad year, or versus, it's a no and it probably will always be a no, so I don't want to waste, your time and, and efforts for that. So I'm trying to think of a specific one. I can't think of it, but it would happen, year to year. Every year we would give to somebody that we probably had said no to, previously, and it was usually just a matter of either timing or availability of funding. Our program didn't necessarily change scope, so it was pretty consistent year to year as to what our focus was. But I would say generally, some of it had to do with the nonprofits evolving their approach and being more creative in building their programs. I will say our funding with MD Bio Foundation grew as your programs grew, mm-hmm. And the kind of exposure and visibility, when you added additional, these Atlas programs for, college readiness and kind of making that bridge, and when you upped some of your government affairs and your media, and things like that. So
great, thanks. Any questions from the phone? Do they have to be off mute? I don't know.
Hi, this is Sarah Weisberg. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm from New York. I work in an organization called BioBus. We have a mobile lab, and I'm also currently chair of the Mobile Laboratory Coalition. Most of the participants are on mute, so feel free to type in questions. But I will jump in with a question, which is, in what ways do you think of corporate giving, corporate donors as different from individual foundation or government donors? Why even bother, I guess, making that distinction?
Well, I'll go ahead. I think that they're all their own beast, if you will. I think that there are advantages and disadvantages for going after any type of funding. You really have to think about your capacity to engage in a relationship. So if you want to engage corporate funders, like we've been saying, it's important to do the prep work, be able to take it not just from a financial standpoint and offer more, because what the employees at these companies can offer your programming is just as valuable as the money that they're going to be offering your programming, and it's a way to potentially be a sustainable model for some of your programming as well.
I will jump in to say also that, when you're looking at government grants or you're looking at foundation grants, oftentimes there's quite a substantial request around outcomes or following, up and providing a lot of these kind of more of the metrics associated with it. While some corporate funders require that and are more sophisticated in their programs, a lot of them aren't that far along. And so you could actually, get funding without a lot of, necessary follow-up after the fact with reporting your outcomes or, if you met your, required objectives or, any of that. So sometimes it can actually be probably less legwork on the, kind of
administrative side.
Administrative side.
That's very true.
Thank you. We have a question from Aaron. Are there general differences in corporate interest for standalone programs versus new initiatives within existing institutions?
I think that when you have an established program, it's great, but it comes back to the company, and some companies are excited about a new opportunity, and some companies want to be able to see that you've been doing things for X amount of years and that you have the trust of the environment or the audience that you're serving. So it really can go either way, and that's part of the conversation that you're going to want to have with your program officer, your CSR representative. Have an open conversation. You can, as Brian mentioned, you can pitch options. So you can talk about the work that you've been doing, or you could use this as an opportunity to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, I think, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No, keep going.
Oftentimes, I think that geography is important for a lot of companies. So, if you're in Chicago, let's say, and the company you're pitching is in Texas, and they don't have any presence in the Chicago area, chances are that's not going to be a winning proposal. A lot of companies, certainly that we work with, all are looking, when we're doing research, we're looking for companies that are Maryland-based or have a significant presence in Maryland, which is where we are and our programs are. Looking outside of that region or looking outside the area has really not been a winning formula for us. So really thinking about who are the companies in your community where they have either headquarters or significant presence to do that. Even for organizations that are more rurally based, and you have companies or organizations in those areas, maybe they are more interested in trying to connect up with a local organization doing good work. So don't necessarily, look for those companies that have a presence in your community already.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, there may be an opportunity there too if you're looking to expand your programs in a new geography. Look for the companies there. They may be very excited about the opportunity to help you get into that area, and so it's maybe an extension of your existing program, but in a new area. That's kind of, maybe would bridge the gap too. So.
Thank you. We have another question from Danae. How do you determine the best funding blend for your organization, meaning mixing different sources of funding, including corporate funding?
Say that again, Sarah. I couldn't hear everything you said.
Just how do you figure out, what the right ratio of, or is there a way to think about the ratio of corporate funding versus other grants versus individual fundraising?
I think the general rule of thumb or best practice is to try to have equal pies as often as possible. You don't want to rely too heavily on one area because, as Liz mentioned, corporate funders are always beholden to a budget. So just because you've been getting that source of money for a certain number of years doesn't mean that you can always rely on it for the next year. And the same thing, I think, is true with government funding as well. So as often as possible, yes, absolutely. Yes. So as often as possible, when you can work to continuing to diversify your funding and having, like I said, as often as possible, equal amounts, you are in a better shape.
Yeah, an example of that is when we were raising funds for our newest mobile lab, we really were focused on a diversity of funders. So we got some public support, a significant amount of corporate support, and probably an equal amount of foundation support. So having that diverse fundraising pool really helps when one of those might, for a variety of reasons, become dry for, maybe there's a bad year in the market, maybe there's a bad year for your municipality or state, or the economy tanks. So how do you sort of make sure that you have a diversified funding portfolio? I think is always a great idea to do that when you can.
Yeah.
But don't turn down any money.
Another question from David. How many asks are you making on an annual basis?
Maybe lot.
You could say.
Good question, David.
A lot. And I think it goes back to there's no set number that you should be trying to reach, and you are going to hear no for far more than you hear yes. But it goes back to being persistent without being aggressive. You keep your fundraising goal in mind, because you want to think there's formulas that you can do, and that's a whole nother conversation, but there are formulas that you can do when you're trying to come up with how many asks that you're trying to make, but just keep in mind what your goal is.
I've heard like a 1 to 4, that you maybe can expect about a 1 in 4 conversion.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's really good.
And I mean, that would be great if it was just 1 in 4. I think that another sort of advice I would add in is don't take it personally, right? Just because a funder says no doesn't devalue your program. It could, as Liz said, it just might not be a good fit. It might not be a good budget fit. It might not be the right fit for the organization, but it's never personal, right? It's not, oh, this is, a bad program. Now, it doesn't mean you can't debrief what your pitch was and your proposal and say, we could have done a better job here, or our evaluation formulation was not right, or we didn't explain this very well. So you always want to get that feedback from funders when you can, and many of them will give you feedback. Hopefully it's honest feedback, but it's rarely personal, and just know that if you're only getting a handful of no's, you're not asking enough.
Mm-hmm. I would like to ask Liz, I don't know if you ever tracked maybe monthly or yearly how many requests you received.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really report out on metrics at that point. I mean, we got hundreds a year, and we maybe gave to 10% of the requests. We also, though, we were a little different, and our process has changed since I ran it, so it's different now than it was before. But one of the things is we were always clear to say that we would evaluate your request at any dollar amount. So, some organizations, if you ask for $250,000, they will only consider it at $250,000 versus considering for different amounts, and so that's a good question to ask too. And so oftentimes, we cut things in half if we could, you know what I mean? If there was, if I would like to give something, you know what I mean? And that's what we say. We'd like to give them something. It's a great program. We can't do this, but we could do this. And so.
Yeah, that's a great point, though, is when you're doing research is look at the amounts that companies or the funder is giving. If their average gift is $5,000, don't go in with a $50,000 ask, right? Really know what level the funder, oftentimes foundations and corporations will have a list of their funders and how much, or you can go on their 990s and do that research, but really understanding the right ask amount, because a really high ask sometimes could completely they'll put you in the round file.
Yeah. I mean, and I often would, when people would ask, how much can I ask for? I'd say, well, you can certainly put any amount down. Our average grant is, X amount. So that's just for your info, but we will consider, it for lesser amounts. But again, that's a good question to ask.
So I have another question. I'm surprised this hasn't come up yet, but you at MD Bio do such a good job with your sponsorship, and really recognizing, I think, your corporate partners in particular. Something that we've struggled with is how to start building out the right sponsorship package and the right levels. And I wonder, and other than just kind of making it up as you go along, which is, of course, one strategy. But I wonder if you have any resources to recommend as people start to think about, different potential levels of sponsorship and recognition, especially in the mobile lab industry, where, like you said, we essentially all have moving billboards.
I think that it's a mix of making it up as you go and knowing what kind of best practices are. Being a development professional, I am a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, which has a lot of tricks and tips and rules of trade and best practice, which help, with sponsorship and figuring out those levels. But it's also about your organization's capacity. So when you're thinking about, okay, well, a $20,000 sponsorship level is meaningful to us. How are we willing to recognize the companies that give us this amount of money? Because when you're offering recognition or benefits, that's work that you do after you get the gift. So that should be just as important as thinking about how big their name is going to be on your vehicle or how big their logo is going to be on your website.
I would also, from a corporate perspective, say that, again, do some research, and not necessarily with just company or organizations or your competitors, but also local business organizations. How much does the Chamber of Commerce charge for X, sponsorship of this event? Or your local, tech council, how much do they charge for these sponsorships? Or how much does the local, March of Dimes chapter charge for their, corporate dinner? Those types of things, because I think more often than not, if you're looking regionally or at the local level, that gives you an idea as to how much companies are willing to pay for these types of more quid pro quo kind of sponsorships. And sometimes those corporate sponsorships come out of a different budget than donations also.
Right.
So
that's right. Multiple ways to go into
yeah.
it. Right. Through marketing. Or,
yep, exactly.
Great, those are some really good ideas. Thank you.
I think we have about a minute left, Sarah. Are there any more questions?
I think we might have covered it for today. Just so we all know, I will be sharing the PowerPoint, which Dana was nice enough to share with me, and you'll also be able to access the recording of this webinar on the Mobile Lab Coalition website. We hope that everyone here stays in touch with us. Feel free to ask questions to me and to any of the Mobile Lab Coalition board members as you continue to work on your corporate sponsorship package for your mobile lab.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
No, that's it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for taking the time out of the day to talk to us. It's been very insightful.
Thank you.